Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake. I'm an author and robot, and today I have kind of a, I don't know if this is a weird thing to just talk about, but I wanted to talk about in honor of reading Eve the Awakening by Jenna Moreci right now. And some discussions that I've had with other people that have either read it or even other people that haven't read it, just talking about various things that can appear in books. I wanted to do this list, which I'll get into in a second. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Check out the links below for different ways to be involved. Number two, if you would like to get a copy, an ARC copy, of my forthcoming satire, Boom Boom Boom, check out the NetGalley link in the description below. And if you would like to be featured on this channel, check out Lemoy and the Fresh Meat feature down in the description. So with all that said, let's get into it. So what I wanted to talk about today is things that you can get away with in video games that are a harder sell in books. Now, with this whole topic in general, I'm not trying to say in any way that you can't do this in books, that there are no successful attempts at this in books, or that it is straight up unacceptable in books. But what I've noticed through conversation and through reading book reviews for other books outside of Eve the Awakening is that there are certain things that I have realized don't bother me, and I'm theorizing. It's because I'm used to seeing some of these things in video games. So when I'm reading a book, if I don't set my expectations for literature, then I don't necessarily mind if these things appear in a book, if you give me a good reason for why they exist. And some of that can include the genre that it's in. I can permiss a lot more things because of the genre. In the same way that if it's a video game, usually you can get away with a lot of different things. And I would love to hear some of your guys' ideas. There are easily going to be more than what I've captured here. These are just what I was thinking about right now. And I'll try to give some examples of what I'm talking about. But I would love to hear if you guys have noticed anything, if any of you guys are gamers, what you can get away with in a video game that you can't necessarily get away with as easily or get away with without being questioned if you write it into literature. I will also accept what you can get away with in a movie, but you can't get away with as easily in a book. So the number one thing that is obviously at the top of the list because I'm reading Eve the Awakening is that it's okay if the main character is OP or all-powerful or is decked out to the point of it being cheats or is somehow multi-skilled in all of these different ways. And so in Eve the Awakening, Eve is super strong, she heals really fast, she is very smart, she can do things telepathically, like move giant blocks of things. And she's just pretty much the best in all of the world. And I've seen a lot of people have a problem with this, and I understand them not liking it at all. But I just found it very interesting, the different approaches to Eve's character, or the acceptance level of Eve having all of these powers, because it's not one of the things that really bothers me about her. Like, if you're going to tell me a story about the best around whatever, I will accept that. Just tell me the story. And at the moment, I'm playing Cyberpunk 2077, and I actually just did a mission where V had to go and hack into something really big. I don't even remember what it was. The name of the mission doesn't even matter, because if you haven't played it, it doesn't even matter. But somebody was saying, like, oh, you must be really skilled at this. And so your character, V, is pretty much, like, great at shooting, great at doing great at hacking, great at doing net runner things, great at negotiating, great at fighting. And so she, because I play the one as a female, so she is like all over the place doing all of these various things. And one of the a very common gameplay element is to constantly be upgrading your character to make them more and more powerful, and that is something that happens in Cyberpunk, and it's also something that happens in Saints Row. In fact, with Saints Row 4, you basically work to upgrade your character to the point that you can fly and you can shoot all of these massive lasers and you're basically indestructible and you can get exploded and it doesn't do any damage. Like, you are working toward making your character OP and you are like, this is what I want. And it doesn't actually ruin the story to make your character stronger. also on that fact is that your character, not just in like Cyberpunk or Saints Row, but generally in any of the games, especially first-person shooter games that you play, your character will have to be good at whatever they're doing all of the time for the story to progress. So they have to be the best gunner, otherwise you don't get past the level that you're on. But maybe they're totally incompetent depending on how the story is written, and yet you still have to survive because otherwise the story ends. But we don't really question how much damage a character is going through, and hey, that's not believable because we are the character and we're playing through that game. Like there are, one of my favorite games is Outlast. I love the story and the characters in those, and freaking Milo, I was salty when Milo died at first, but I understood why it happened, but I was still pissed off because he tried so hard to get out, and he was so devoted, and then he dies in the end. Spoiler alert, it was not fulfilling an ending, but it's an ending that makes sense. It just didn't feel good. But he gets, his fingers chopped off, and he falls a bunch of floors down, and you'd expect him to be running out of steam for these numbers of hours that he's doing this extraneous exercise, running away from all these psychopaths, and also from the trauma that he's received, either bumping his head, being thrown around, having his fingers cut off, but he doesn't stop. And that's because he has to keep going in order for the story to continue. But if we were reading a book, we might be more at a pause to go, hey, wait a second, this isn't believable because why is he not acting this way? I don't know. I'm not saying that nobody has ever questioned in some of these video games why a character A is still able to keep going when obviously they've been through trauma. But I do think there's a level of suspension of disbelief, specifically in games that are first-person shooters or something like Saints Row or Grand Theft Auto, where you just accept this is how it is because the story needs to progress, and I'm gonna get shot like 20 times, and it's fine. Because that's also a thing. Like, if you had a character in a book getting shot up as much as a character in a video game, nobody would believe you that this is truly written, like, to be realistic. It's just accepted. So I think that's interesting. Another thing that I considered you can get away with in video games but not in a book as easily is abuse of all of the side characters when you have the freedom to do that. Like, not all games let you abuse NPCs, but there are many a game that allow you to abuse NPCs. You know, Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption, Saints Row. I don't know all of the games, but just so many games where you're just free to play and you're free to go and hit whoever you freaking want and to do whatever you want and to be a dick to whoever you want. And the story just keeps going, especially in the ones where you get to choose the outcome of something based on decisions that you're making, is you can make if you're given the options to answer in certain ways, to make your character a total dick or a total criminal or whatever. However, if you're reading a book and the main character abuses all of the side characters and abuses the love interest and abuses literally everybody and is kind of just an asshole. Hello, Layla. You hate her. But that could just have something to do with you're in control of that character, so you don't mind as much as when you're reading a book and you're just watching this brawl go down in this story and you're like, what the frick are you doing? I did not choose this. This is not what I signed up for in this story. What the frick? Another thing I noticed is bizarre character designs are more acceptable in video games than in books. So one of the other things that I recently saw while looking through book reviews is somebody complaining about this character has black and white striped eyes or weird shaped eyes, or this character design is totally bizarre. Why is this character blue? Why does this character look like that? Why does this character have all of these ridges all over their body and the 3 toes, and like, what the frick is this? And in any game specifically that allows you to design your character, maybe this just comes down to choice, because stuff like Saints Row and Cyberpunk and stuff that has character design, let's go for freaking Skyrim as well, Elder Scrolls, whatever lets you have a character design and go kind of crazy. You don't really question why your eyes are able to look in this weird atypical manner. Or if you're in Saints Row, let's not even pretend we're on Saints Row 4 where you're in a computer simulation, so whatever, we can accept that everybody can just look as freaky as they want. But let's go with Saints Row 3 when you're in real life, and you can make your character like this 500-pound, 600-pound, 7-foot-tall purple guy or blue guy with fat lips and like doing whatever it is that you want to do with the exterior of that character, while everybody else around them looks totally normal, and you're not like, what the frick, why does this character look like this? But again, maybe that's because user designed it, so user is not going to be like, what the frick, it looks like this. The game devs didn't do this. But at the same time, you have to wonder, if we're in a customize your character look, why would they allow this when none of the other characters look like that? So, I mean, it's just more permissible to make your character look totally like a freak, and some people even try as hard as they possibly can to make their character look bizarre because they have the options to do so. But even the smallest weird thing in a book can set people off and be like, that's not possible. Why is that? And then they need a whole backstory as to why that character is allowed to look different. And then they will judge you on whether or not that is a good enough reason for that character to have that difference. And sometimes just saying that they're an alien from another planet isn't a good enough reason. So that's interesting. Another thing is that the chosen trope is much more accepted and questioned less, and this kind of goes with making your character OP in video games, is often with your stories in video games, because it's following a very specific life, especially in RPGs and first-person shooters that have stories, your character is specially chosen. And I'm thinking of this right now with Dying Light 2, since I started playing Dying Light 2, and your character Aiden, he's not exactly a chosen one, but he is something special called a pilgrim, and he was experimented on as a kid and had these special abilities to not be as destructive or to not be as easily destroyed or hurt as a regular person. And I don't know what other powers he's going to have since I've only just started playing the game, but you recognize that he is special, that he has special abilities other people don't have, and he's sent on this special mission to go and do these things. Though I think his MO is just to go and get the guy that was experimenting on him, and he's living in a zombie apocalypse. So you get that mess. But he is sort of a chosen one, and there are chosen ones all over video games, for especially RPGs. And it's just sort of, hey, I don't have a problem with this. But when it comes to tropes in books, people can get so serious about them and their use of them, and if they exist at all. Like, I'm pretty sure I've even seen videos on YouTube here saying stop using the chosen one, but they're not really criticized in video games. They're pretty regular in video games. And that's not even to say that everybody that reads books hates. Like, again, none of this is to say that you can't do them, that you shouldn't do them, or that they are not loved. But just that it's interesting the different ways that, like, the different mediums that you can tell stories in, and the different things that the different communities accept as just part of that medium versus what gets more pushback when you include it. Another thing that I noticed is that in video games that gives you the opportunity, you can bang or woo anybody and everybody that you want, and it's unquestioned. But also that might go down, again, to choice. You're the one investing time into flirting with any of these characters or paying any of these characters to go and have sex with. However, if you're in a book, unless maybe it's a romance and then you just accept it, readers generally question if your character either sleeps around and then they're looking for tropes, or they're called they can come off or be called or end up actually being some kind of sue because everybody around them is having sex with them or falling in love with them. However, you can do that in a video game and nobody cares. Maybe that's because at some video game level it's wish fulfillment. I don't know. Another thing that is easier to get away with, and so there is the whole subgenre of Bizarro in fiction. So we do have this, and often I think general audiences are more introduced to Bizarro through children's cartoons, but a lot of children's shows are actually very bizarre, and you just accept it as that's kind of just how it is. And then if we think about, again, Saints Row, because that whole thing, Saints Row and Saints Row 3 and 4 are all about ridiculousness, like freaking people walking around in hot dog suits and the Genki murder time, and you've got the glitching that goes on in number 3, the glitching that goes on in number 4, where people are like split up with legs, or the giant soda can mascot that you have to fight, or the gun happy president fighting aliens that have come to take over the world, and chariot races pulled by gimps. Like, you accept this in the video games, especially because you go into Saints Row expecting some kind of level of ridiculousness. At least I do. Maybe other people don't, because I never played 1 or 2, but whatever. But if you did something this bizarre in a book that was presented, I don't know, maybe that again has to do with expectations, because if the book is presented as serious and then you get to a part with like chariot races pulled by gimps, I feel like it's going to be taken as way more serious than it probably is meant to be taken. It's like abuse and not just being ridiculous. Whereas it comes off a lot more ridiculous in the scenario of Saints Row. Or I think there was the club full of furries running around with giant dildos and smacking people with like using a giant dildo as a weapon. But if it was in a book, you might get more questionable looks on your choices. So there's that. Another thing that is common, especially with RPGs and first-person shooters that have long story modes, is the never-ending money or cash supply or stuff supply overall. And this also comes specifically because I'm playing Cyberpunk right now, and I'm not overflowing with money because I haven't bought all of the cars and I haven't bought all of the housing, and I still have other things that I need my character to buy. But at the moment, I'm also still waiting for some cybernetics to come in, so I'm not spending all of my money. But I have a lot of money. And I have like 4 cars and 3 houses. And if your character in a book has so much money, the reader, and a never-ending resource going on, the reader is going to question where all that stuff is coming from and how they're set up to be like that, and do they believe it or not. However, if you're playing a video game and you're just kind of thrown random dollar bills as you complete missions and you have so much money in the bank, you don't really question it because those are your resources to get to the things that you want. And also, I guess you're seeing yourself put in the work to get those things, and I know that I don't ever question how much money and experience points story stuff's giving me in the story. I just accept that those are how they are in the story. And then this next one is more for movies, though it does happen in video games as well, is starting a book out with exposition or lore. And that's, like, it's not that people don't do that. People do that a heck of a lot. But you also see a lot of pushback from readers and agents, and a lot of discussion in general about prologues or starting out your story with exposition or world building or all of that. And this one specifically came to mind from when I was watching Encanto a couple weeks ago, and it started out with a lore on the house and the family through that storytelling. And I was thinking about, what if this was a book, and how would this work as a book? And it was all just literally telling about the background of this house. And personally, I'm like, I don't think this is necessary. I would just rather get into the story. But it was trying to quickly establish everything about this family so that you could get into the meat of the story. And with books, you have more time. And it's also easier because movies can establish it much faster than books can actually establish all of the same information. So there is that. And the final thing that I want to mention, because it's just kind of ridiculous, is that in a video game, your character can pick up a gun for the first time, and there's no question about if this is the first time they've ever picked up a gun or if they have any training at all. It's you shooting the gun with your mouse and keyboard and all of that, and you moving the story forward. And the gamer doesn't really, at least I don't really, question how this character can suddenly shoot and survive and has all of these survival skills. But if you do that in a book, people are going to be like, what the frick is this? How can they shoot a gun like that? How is their aim that good? I can at least say I don't always have the greatest aim, and I think my friendly fire accuracy is fairly close to regularly higher percentage than my normal accuracy. Maybe sometimes, not all the time. I'm just going to blame ping for that. Yeah. So anyway, those are a couple of things that I noticed you can get away with in video games easier than you can get away with in books. And I've been wondering if it sort of, if that affects the expectations or the flexibility I have when I go into books. I'm sorry if this seems like a random thing. I kind of just like sharing thoughts and then to get your guys' thoughts on maybe the same thing. And maybe these videos really aren't that interesting, but I personally think it's interesting to compare mediums and to compare storytelling styles and elements and all of that noise. Again, none of this is to say that you can't do any of these things in books or that everybody loves them when they're done in video games or anything against either of these. This is a total neutral video that it just is about some of these elements that I've seen or witnessed or experienced through conversation and reviews, and also my own responses to books versus other people's responses to the same books, and what has been permissible for me but not permissible for other people on believability in a story. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts on this topic, and could you think of any other situations where something is acceptable in games but not in books, or the other way around, where you can do this in books but not in video games if you are a gamer? If you're not a gamer, feel free to say the same thing with movies and television, but something you can't do with books. And how do you feel about any of the elements that I mentioned in today's video? I don't know. I just like to talk about the random things that I think about. So thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to your comments on it all, and thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to your comments down below. With all that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?